and breathe. Welcome to Calm Club. Delighted in this latest episode of our podcast to be joined today by Joel Lewin. Joel's a CBT therapist and a trainee clinical psychologist currently studying at the University of Oxford. And Joel's going to talk to us today around the fear of losing control, something I'm sure many of our listeners, many of our members at Anxiety UK will be familiar with. So, Joel, thanks for joining us, and just tell us a little bit about yourself, your research, and what it is you're hoping to achieve.
Yeah, well, thanks for inviting me along, Dave. It's really nice to be here. We've been doing some research looking at fear of losing control and anxiety. Control is a concept that's been looked at by psychologists for a long time. And there are kind of different ways of thinking about control. In the 1950s, this psychologist called Julian Rotter was looking at something called locus of control. So that's the extent to which someone believes they can control outcomes themselves versus how much they believe outcomes are controlled by chance or by powerful other people. So yeah, control is something that psychologists have been thinking about for quite a long time. And some research has looked at control in anxiety disorders. So, for example, attempts to maintain control of thoughts has been highlighted as something important in OCD. Although psychologists have been looking at control for a long time, it's only recently that they've honed in on the fear of losing control. So a couple of years back, psychologist called Adam Radomski and his colleagues at Concordia University in Montreal, they started to break down and measure the fear of losing control. So we're building on their work and looking at things in a slightly different way.
Okay, fascinating. So the concept of the fear of losing control then is probably, from a research perspective, fairly new and very much undiscovered in depth by the sound of it, Joel. But I suspect it's something that many of our listeners, many of our members at Anxiety UK will have heard or understand that and will have experienced that fear of losing control. And it's probably quite a common factor for them. What tips, what advice would you have for them, that those people that are living with a condition that creates such that fear? What would you say to them about how would you manage that fear? Any nuggets of wonderful tips and advice that you can share today with us?
It's a really good question. And so since I've been doing this research, I've spoken to a lot of people struggling with anxiety, and often they'll say, yes, that makes sense. Fear of losing control is something really important in my anxiety. So, it does seem to be, quite a prominent thing. And it comes up in different ways for different people. So people could be afraid of losing control of thoughts. Some people might worry that if they lost control of their thoughts, they could, for example, lose their mind. People might be afraid of losing control of their emotions or their behaviors or sensations in their body or bodily functions. So, yeah, it can be a different experience slightly for different people. But in some ways, we can approach it in some ways a similar but slightly different way for each person. So, first part is identifying what that fear actually is, and sometimes that's might be easier said than done. Sometimes people might have a very clear, specific fear about losing control, but other times it might take a little bit of kind of probing to or reflecting to pinpoint what that fear actually is. And then, once you've done that, you can kind of hold that fear up to the light a little bit, take a careful look at it. And I don't know if you've heard of something called the anxiety equation before.
No, that's a new one for me, I must admit.
Okay, yeah. So the anxiety equation is basically anxiety equals the perceived probability of that threat occurring times the perceived awfulness of that danger. So you've got that top part, and then underneath, you've got your perceived ability to cope with that threat times the perceived rescue factors. So people coming to help if something bad happened. And so you can think about each part of that equation. So asking yourself, how likely is this fear to really occur? And when we're feeling really anxious, it might feel like, oh yeah, it's definitely going to happen. But when we can take a little bit of a step back and ask ourselves, how likely is it really that this is going to happen? Have I ever lost control before? And often the answer might be no. And perhaps when I think about it carefully, I'm probably not really very likely to lose control. So when we can start to kind of just evaluate a little bit those factors, it can be really helpful. And I mean, another part is kind of testing that fear out. So asking yourself, is it really possible to lose control even if I tried? Um, I mean, if I'm afraid, for example, of losing control of my thoughts, and I'm taking really careful measures to make sure I maintain control of my thoughts, and I'm worried that if I didn't do that, I might lose control of my thoughts. Maybe just trying little experiments, kind of, if I spent 30 seconds deliberately trying to lose control of my thoughts, would that even really be possible? So sometimes, yeah, when we start to explore these fears a little bit more, test them out, um, it can start to make quite a big change. Um, yeah, I mean, there's also that. Stop me if I'm.
No, no, that's fine. Yeah, I was just thinking about I often get drawn into talking about rational and irrational thoughts, and I think the one thing I often say when I'm doing training sessions is that often you know what you're thinking is irrational, and that can often be the case with that fear of losing control. Can often be a very real, very perceived threat, but also you know yourself you might be being irrational about it. But even though you know it's that irrational side of your brain that's making you think like that, the rational side is telling you that it's irrational, but you can't stop it. It's
Yeah, yeah, it,
you know
it,
it's like I know I'm doing something embarrassing, but I'm going to go ahead and do it anyway.
yeah, yeah,
If it was doing something I don't know embarrassing in public, you would the rational side of your brain would say, "Stop it! Don't be silly! Don't do that." And you'd normally control it. But this is almost something that it goes back to that being out of control, doesn't it? Losing control element. And even though you know it's not right and you know you shouldn't be doing it and you feel it's not right, you still can't help yourself and you can't stop yourself because you feel like that you're out of control.
yeah, yeah.
Well,
I
many
mean,
of our listeners can hopefully listening to us trying to explain it like that, we'll be able. We're sat there now thinking, yeah, that's what I experience. That's what I go through. I don't know.
yeah, I mean that can be really frustrating. That feeling that I know when I think about it that that fear is irrational, but yeah, it's still really scary. And um, I mean, sometimes when that's the case, there's only so far that thinking about things can take us. That we need to start, taking small steps and doing things differently. Um, and I mean, a start to that can be asking, what is this fear stopping me from doing?
Yeah,
And you know, you might have heard of the OCD or anxiety bully analogy. Um, it's quite a nice way of thinking about it. So let's imagine sort of I'm 11 and I'm starting my first day of secondary school, and this bully comes up to me on the playground and asks for £1 of my lunch money. And yeah, it's quite scary. So to make things easier for myself, I give in, I give him the pound, and so the next day when I come along to school, the bully comes up to me. I wonder what do you think he's going to ask me this time?
He's going to pound again.
Yeah, he's going to ask for a pound again. Maybe he's even going to ask for more because it went so well last time. So yeah, and every time, it feels like it's easier for myself just to give in. But each time he's going to come back and ask for more, and it can kind of be the same with anxiety. The anxiety bully can be asking us, don't do that because it's too scary. Something bad might happen, or you might lose control, and it can feel easier in the moment to give in and avoid it. But each time we give in, it might come back and ask for more next time. So initially, I mean, taking those small steps, saying no to the anxiety bully it can be really hard, but just trying to find, small ways to almost fight back against it. I mean, as an example, if somebody's afraid of losing control of maybe their emotions, losing control of anxiety or sort of bodily sensations, so they're avoiding going into town, avoiding going out. Just taking very small steps initially, maybe as small as sort of walking up the street a little way. And it might be that somebody can start taking those steps by themselves, or they might need support from somebody or a professional. But yeah, just thinking about how can I say no to that anxiety bully. It can be a really nice way of thinking about it.
Yeah, and I was trying. There's another thought came to my mind then that something I often say about again in delivering training and stuff. It's about being in control of the anxiety and not the anxiety being in control of you. And
Yeah,
that's tied to this fear of losing control, isn't it? If you feel that it's out of control, that the anxiety's got control of you, you can't manage that, you're going to still always give into it, aren't you? Whereas if you can change that dynamic. And so often we talk about people ask us about getting cured for that anxiety, and obviously because it's quite a natural thing, we all experience it every day, and it's not always something that's going to be debilitating. It's something that you can feel a little bit anxious about, but it doesn't stop you doing what you want to do. It doesn't stop you functioning normally. But it's when it starts to impact on that day-to-day functioning. That's when you need that support and that help, isn't it? So that you can continue to function normally. And we often say it's not about curing it, because if we cured you of anxiety, we'd eliminate it in total. And the times when it's actually helpful, you would put yourself in danger. I think of a simple example is, feeling anxious about crossing a busy main road. Well, it's only natural to feel like that because it's busy traffic. But if you eliminated that anxiety, you wouldn't think about it. You just walk into the road. Well, that's not helpful either. So
yes,
we
yeah,
need a degree of anxiety in our lives, but we need a degree that we're in control of, not that's in control of us. So that's the way I try and explain that concept in a training environment. So yeah, we want to get to that point where we're in control of the anxiety and it's not in control of us, isn't it? Which is the same sort of thought process, isn't it? And some of those tips and advice that you're saying is about and in terms of this fear of losing control, and there's obviously different ways it will manifest, as you sort of outlined. It might be physical or emotional or whatever, but will it vary from condition to condition as well? And are there or is it something that although the fear of losing control might vary from social anxiety to health anxiety or whatever types of anxiety, are some of these common tools, these common strategies that people can deploy to help them common to whatever type of condition they're dealing with, or is there some that are better suited to a particular condition?
yeah, that's a great question. I mean, it's possible that some aspects of feared loss of control might be common to different anxiety problems, but also that certain aspects of feared loss of control might be specific to specific problems, and that's what we're looking at in the research. So, I mean, if anybody wants to help us find out, then yeah, we'd be really glad for participants. And so I think there are some. So in some ways, the strategies sort of share a common basis, but might look slightly different in practice. So if we're thinking about, okay, so with different anxiety problems, safety-seeking behaviors are really important. So the things that we do to protect us or sort of prevent that feared outcome occurring, which might be helpful, feel helpful rather in the short term, but in fact keep that fear locked in place. So we see those safety seeking behaviors across all anxiety problems, but they might look slightly different. So yeah, if I give you an example from social anxiety, so imagine if I have a fear of losing control of my anxiety in a social situation, and I'm afraid as well of losing control of, for example, sweating in that situation. And I might do certain things to prevent that feared outcome occurring, like maybe having a drink before going into the social situation, or keeping my answers really short, or asking the other person lots of questions to try and prevent that feared loss of control occurring. And although they might feel like they help in the short term, they keep that fear locked in place because I never get to test out if it would really come true without those safety seeking behaviors. So, um, I mean, with any problem, we would think about what those behaviors are and how we can start to experiment with dropping them so that we can truly test out if that fear is going to come true. And we'll pretty much always find out that it won't. And by dropping those behaviors, we start to get liberated from that fear. So in different problems, the particular behaviors might be different, but the overall idea of dropping those behaviors to test out if that fear is really going to come true is similar.
Fantastic. Really interesting. Really interesting. I mean, you talked about the research, and we'll make sure that we'll get some details from you to put onto the to the notes about this particular podcast, so that if anybody's listening is interested in getting involved with Joel's research, we'll be able to signpost you to where you can contact Joel and his team to volunteer for the research if you're interested in taking part in this. What do you what are you hoping to learn from the research? I mean, obviously, early days, you've not, you're only just embarking on this journey with it, and you won't know what the outcomes are going to be, what the findings are going to be yet. So, and until you get to that point, you're not sure what you'll be able to do. But what do you hope to learn from it, Joel, that may be able to enable you to improve the support for people who are out there living with the fear of losing control? Because often our members and the people listening to this podcast and reading our magazines and stuff, they're looking for something that's maybe there's a new treatment option coming down the line, or something else that's not yet been discovered. Because we know from your early part of your conversation, this is very much a developing area, and for many people, they haven't found that sort of that magic wand yet that helps them manage that particular aspect of their anxiety or their anxiety disorder. So, what are you hoping to, without promising anything you may not be able to promise until you've done the work, so to speak?
Yeah, that's a good point. We don't want to overpromise. Yeah, but what we're um, what we're looking at is whether there are similarities across different anxiety disorders in terms of fear of losing control, or whether there are specific differences between different anxiety disorders. And that can be quite helpful because by understanding the specific nature of fear of losing control, whether it's similar across disorders or whether there are really important differences, it can help people and therapists to better understand the nature of what is driving the anxiety. So it can help people to hone in, specifically what is it we need to be looking at here in terms of fear of losing control. And that in turn can help to kind of better target interventions.
Right.
Yeah. And
so it goes back to that question I asked earlier, really, doesn't it? About is there a common way to manage it? I guess this research will give you that indication. Actually, it is quite common across all of these different conditions, and therefore a treatment approach that's common to all should work with them all. Or actually, you need to take a different treatment approach depending on what type of anxiety disorder it is. So that's what you're hoping to learn, I guess, more than anything, is it?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And it might be that, because in CBT, we do a lot of what's called behavioral experiments. So finding ways to test out if that fear is real or true, or if it's, something that we can let go of. And by understanding the specific nature of fear of losing control, it can help us to think about ways to design those experiments with people to really target that and test those beliefs out in a very, I suppose, specific and effective way. Yeah.
So ultimately, then we could get potentially at the back of this particular study some indication, some steer on different on a way to approach the treatment of different types of anxiety disorders, or whether we can do that in a common way.
Exactly.
It could inform the way we treat different anxieties quite considerably. Then,
I mean, hopefully, yeah. I mean,
you never know, do you? To the work's done, and that you've got all the findings and all the evaluations been completed.
Yeah, it's still early days, so
but that's
I'll get back to you on that one.
Yeah. The potential benefit could be potentially huge, couldn't it? So, if you're listening to this and you think, "Gosh, that's something that really could change the game for the future," so to speak, then and you want to get involved, then do look out for the information on that. No guarantees that this particular piece of research is going to find that magic wand, but you just never know. There's so many different pieces of research going on. Sooner or later, a combination of some of them or one of them is going to unearth something really, a nugget of real genius for it that's going to help unlock some of these challenges for us, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, it's never a guarantee, but it's always about kind of listening to people who struggle with anxiety, what their experiences are, and seeing, how we might be able to sort of develop that into kind of testable hypotheses. Yeah. So I mean, I'm really grateful to all the people I've spoken to up to this point to help guide the research. Yeah.
And sometimes you might not find that golden nugget in your piece of research, but actually that's one path that you can say, well, actually, we looked at that path. That's not going to unearth anything that's going to help us. So you can go and look at different other paths, other hypotheses, can't you, to explore different avenues to see, what can we call on and what can we find to unlock that particular challenge. Brilliant, Joel. As always, it's always fascinating talking to researchers and understanding what they're doing, why they're doing it, and the role that their work can do, can play in helping all those people that are living with anxiety disorders, to help them, hopefully in years to come, understand it better and have alternative treatment pathways that's going to help them manage and live with their anxiety much more comfortably than they maybe are today. And that's what we're all hoping for, isn't it? To find that mission is to help make anxiety, the despair associated with anxiety, a thing of the past. Thank you for your time today, and we'll make sure that we share the details with our listeners to get in touch with you if they want to take part or support and help in any way your research. And for those regular listeners, thank you. I hope you've enjoyed this episode of And Breathe, and we'll be back, hopefully not too distant future, with another fantastic podcast coming up in the next month or two. So do keep an eye out on the website and listen out for where you get your podcast from to when this episode goes live and when the future episodes are going to be available for you. So thank you all.